The first time I saw her, I didn't expect anything beyond a professional interaction. She was standing near the glass doors of the office, clipboard in hand, reviewing notes with a quiet intensity that made the whole room feel like it had slowed down. There was something about the way she carried herself, confident, yet unassuming, that immediately drew my attention. I couldn't help but notice the graceful way she moved. Every gesture, whether adjusting her blazer or tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, felt deliberate, almost cinematic in its subtlety. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and measured, carrying a warmth that contrasted with the sharp efficiency of her words. I caught myself listening a little too closely, memorizing the rhythm, the soft pauses, the tiny inflections that made her sound approachable without losing authority. There was a gentle steadiness in the way she interacted with the team, a natural command that didn't need to be loud or forceful. It made me both respect her and, I realized, admire her more than I should have for a simple first encounter. Our first handshake felt ordinary at first, just another formal greeting, but something about it lingered. Her hand was firm, yet not overpowering, and when our fingers met, there was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. For a moment, I felt a strange, fluttering warmth in my chest, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and an unnameable tension. It was brief, a blink in the flow of office introductions, yet it stuck with me. I watched her from across the room as she interacted with others. There was a quiet elegance in the way she listened, tilting her head slightly, eyes attentive, lips curving into a small, knowing smile when someone made a point she approved of. It wasn't just her physical presence that captivated me, it was the subtle strength beneath the surface, the vulnerability hidden behind her composed exterior. I caught glimpses of her humanity in those small gestures, a laugh shared with a colleague, a fleeting sigh when reviewing paperwork, a pause as if gathering her thoughts. Each detail etched itself into my mind, making the ordinary setting of our office feel charged with potential. I felt a cautious pull toward her, an instinct I wasn't entirely comfortable admitting. There was the professional decorum to consider, the age difference that whispered caution, but I couldn't help it. My eyes followed her movements almost unconsciously, noticing the way her scarf brushed her collarbone, the subtle tilt of her head when she considered a suggestion, the quiet confidence that radiated from her even in silence. By the time our first meeting ended, I realized that something had shifted. It wasn't just respect or admiration, it was an unexpected fascination, a sense that beneath the polished professionalism, there was depth and warmth I wanted to know. And I had a feeling that meeting her would be the beginning of something I hadn't anticipated, a slow, unspoken journey that neither of us fully understood yet. In the days that followed our first meeting, I found myself noticing her more than I thought I would. It wasn't anything dramatic, just the quiet moments that most people might overlook. I would see her walking down the hallway, holding a cup of coffee, and the way her fingers wrapped around it with such ease made me realize how much I was attuned to the smallest details. There was a rhythm to her movements, a natural grace that seemed effortless, yet deliberate, as if every gesture carried a subtle message of confidence. Sometimes, I caught her typing at her desk, her eyes scanning the screen with quiet concentration. The light from the window caught her hair, giving it a soft glow that made her look almost ethereal. She didn't notice me watching, of course, and I didn't intend to, but I couldn't help the way my gaze lingered. There was something reassuring in the way she approached her work, a steadiness that made me want to mirror it in my own tasks. The more I observed her, the more I began to notice the subtle ways she showed care. She would pause to ask a colleague if they were all right, a small touch on a shoulder, a patient tilt of her head. Even her laughter, soft and unforced, seemed to fill the room without demanding attention. I realized I was studying her not just as my boss, but as someone I genuinely admired, someone whose presence made ordinary moments feel significant. There were brief instances of closeness that I felt in ways words couldn't capture. An umbrella shared during a sudden rain shower, the accidental brushing of our arms as we reached for the same folder, the fleeting warmth of her hand when handing me a document, it all built a quiet tension, one that was both thrilling and terrifying. Each brush of contact sent a subtle shiver through me, leaving me acutely aware of how alive I felt in her presence. Yet, despite this growing fascination, there was an undercurrent of hesitation. She was older, established, and clearly confident in ways I was still discovering. The age gap was a whisper in my mind, a reminder that any misstep could be more than embarrassing, it could jeopardize everything. I found myself questioning my own thoughts, unsure if the admiration I felt was appropriate, or if it was simply an illusion created by the magnetic way she carried herself. And yet, every day, she drew me in further. Her quiet kindness, the way she treated people with genuine respect, and the subtle hints of vulnerability beneath her composed exterior all made it impossible to ignore the feelings taking root. I began to look forward to passing by her office, to brief exchanges in the hallway, to even the mundane moments that somehow felt electric when she was near. By the end of the week, it was undeniable. My fascination had grown into something more complex, something that balanced admiration, curiosity, and a hesitant, growing desire. And in the quiet corners of my mind, I couldn't stop wondering if she felt it too, if she sensed the subtle pull of our connection, even in the simple, shared rhythms of our daily lives. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind where the office seemed to hum with a muted rhythm, papers shuffling and keyboards clicking in soft unison. Most of the team had left early for meetings or errands, leaving the two of us alone in the conference room. I was organizing some reports when she walked in, her heels making a gentle, precise sound against the polished floor. Even in the solitude of the office, she moved with the same calm authority, but there was something softer in her expression today, a trace of fatigue in her eyes, a hint of exhalation in her posture. She sank into the chair across from me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, two people sharing the quiet of an almost empty room. Then, in a voice lower than usual, almost confiding, she spoke about a project that had been particularly frustrating. Her words weren't sharp or bitter, they were honest, tinged with a vulnerability I hadn't expected to see from someone so composed. I leaned forward slightly, my attention entirely focused on her, trying to match the sincerity in her tone with a measured calmness of my own. As she spoke, I noticed the small gestures that accompanied her openness, the way her fingers traced the edge of her coffee cup, the soft exhale she gave when mentioning a setback, the way her eyes flicked up to mine, as if checking for understanding without needing to say it. I found myself reaching out instinctively, resting a hand lightly on the table, almost brushing hers. The contact was minimal, respectful, yet it carried an unspoken warmth, an acknowledgement of shared humanity. When she paused, I offered a few words of encouragement, simple, honest, and devoid of any pretense. "You've handled more than anyone could expect," I said softly. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, a subtle tilt of her head acknowledging that she appreciated being seen, not as the boss, not as an untouchable figure, but as a person navigating challenges like anyone else. There was a silence that settled between us after that, not awkward, but intimate, the kind that leaves room for unspoken understanding. I felt a quiet thrill in the proximity, the warmth radiating from her presence, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the aroma of coffee. It was grounding and electrifying at once. My chest tightened slightly, awareness of the age difference and professional boundaries whispering caution, yet my heart urged me to simply be present. In that room, amidst reports and half-empty coffee cups, I realized that this moment, her vulnerability, my attentiveness, the subtle contact of our hands, was something I hadn't expected. It wasn't romantic in the overt sense, but it was a step toward a connection deeper than admiration or professional respect. It was trust. And in the way her gaze softened when she finally looked up at me, I felt the fragile beginnings of something neither of us needed to name just yet, but both of us felt undeniably that it was later than usual that evening, the office nearly empty except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint glow of desk lamps. We had been reviewing a particularly challenging project, and I could sense her focus intensifying with every passing minute. She leaned over the table, scanning the reports with her usual meticulousness, her hair falling in soft waves that caught the light. I watched quietly, feeling the pull of the moment, the combination of admiration, nervousness, and something unspoken stirring in my chest. Then she looked up at me, her gaze steady but not demanding, and said a sentence I hadn't anticipated. "I didn't realize how much I could rely on you until now." The words were simple, professional on the surface, but the way she said them, the slight softness in her voice, the almost imperceptible pause before she continued, made them feel intimate. It was a compliment that acknowledged more than just my work, it felt like recognition of who I was, my effort, my judgment, and even my presence. For a moment, I was caught off guard, my mind scrambling to process the weight of her acknowledgement. My chest tightened in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. I wanted to respond, to say something clever or casual, but all I could manage was a quiet, "Thank you." The words sounded inadequate, even to my own ears, but they were all I could summon in the charged atmosphere of the room. The silence that followed was different from the quiet we had shared before. It was heavier, yet inviting. I could feel her gaze lingering, a subtle warmth radiating from the slight tilt of her head. The air between us felt almost tangible, thick with emotion that neither of us dared to name. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts: the age gap, professional boundaries, the risk of misreading signals. And yet, the compliment had ignited something in me, a pull I couldn't ignore. I noticed the small, involuntary gestures that made the moment linger even more: the way she shifted her weight, the soft exhale when she leaned back, the gentle brush of her sleeve against the table as she adjusted her posture. Every detail registered with heightened clarity, each one intensifying the quiet tension between us. My hand itched to move closer, to reach out in some subtle, respectful way, but I restrained myself, savoring the moment rather than forcing it. Even as I left the office that night, her words echoed in my mind. I replayed them over and over, analyzing the inflection, the way her eyes had softened, the tiny smile that had accompanied her acknowledgement. That single sentence had changed something between us, shifting the balance from professional admiration to something far more delicate and personal. It left me both elated and apprehensive, aware that the next steps would need careful navigation. For the first time, I realized that our connection wasn't just professional anymore. There was a spark, subtle yet undeniable, one that would linger in the quiet corners of my thoughts and guide every interaction that followed. And though I couldn't fully understand it yet, I knew that things between us would never be quite the same again. And the days that followed her unexpected compliment, our interactions shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet I could feel the change in every encounter. It wasn't about overt gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in the quiet moments that our connection deepened, the tiny exchanges that carried more weight than words ever could. Walking to the elevator together, I noticed how our shoulders occasionally brushed, a fleeting contact that sent a warm shiver down my spine. I caught myself lingering slightly, adjusting my pace to match hers, both of us aware of the proximity yet pretending it was nothing. The faint scent of her perfume, soft and comforting, lingered in the confined space, creating a warmth I couldn't ignore. I realized that even the briefest of these encounters left me with a fluttering heartbeat and a mind full of thoughts I couldn't articulate. During meetings, our eyes would meet for a fraction longer than necessary. A glance that began as professional focus slowly morphed into something charged with unspoken understanding. She would tilt her head slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that I noticed, and I found myself responding with a small, almost imperceptible nod or smile. The office, once simply a space for work, became a place where every interaction felt electric, every shared silence rich with meaning. Sometimes we shared coffee breaks, sitting across from each other with just enough distance to remain proper, yet close enough for our hands to nearly brush as we reached for sugar or stirrers. The smallest contact, a casual touch of her hand against mine or a brush of her sleeve, felt amplified, leaving a warmth that lingered long after she had walked away. I caught myself replaying these moments in my head, analyzing each detail: the softness in her eyes, the ease in her posture, the quiet steadiness that seemed to anchor me even as it pulled me closer. And yet, the tension wasn't solely physical. It was emotional, subtle, and deeply compelling. I found myself wanting to know more about her thoughts, her feelings, the little things she didn't say. The age gap, the professional dynamic, and the unspoken rules all tugged at my restraint, reminding me to tread carefully, but the pull was undeniable. My admiration had grown into something more, a desire to be near her, to share these quiet moments, to be trusted in ways that went beyond work. Even casual conversations, about deadlines or mundane office matters, carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Every pause, every lingering look, every faint smile felt like a thread weaving us closer together, though neither of us acknowledged it outright. I felt the magnetic pull of her presence, steady and soothing, yet exhilarating, a silent current between us that neither wanted to disrupt but both wanted to feel. By the end of the week, I realized that I was no longer just observing her. I was participating in a delicate dance, balancing admiration, respect, and a growing, unspoken longing. The silent emotional pull between us was undeniable now, and I knew, without needing to say it, that our connection was slowly but surely moving towards something deeper, something profoundly human and quietly irresistible. It was late evening, long after the office had emptied and the hum of computers and fluorescent lights had softened into a quiet stillness. The dim glow of the desk lamps cast soft shadows across the room, painting her features in a way that seemed almost impossible to ignore. We were working side by side on a project, the space between us small yet charged with the silent weight of unspoken thoughts. She looked up from her notes, and our eyes met, holding for a moment longer than either of us should have allowed. There was an intensity in her gaze, an almost imperceptible vulnerability, that made my chest tighten. The quiet moments we'd shared over the past weeks, each glance and brush of hands, had built a subtle tension, and now it felt like it was on the verge of surfacing. I realized, in that suspended silence, that the feelings I had tried to contain were no longer easily ignored. I didn't expect to feel this way, she said softly, her voice careful yet unguarded, as if testing the waters. Her hands rested on the table, fingers slightly brushing the edge, the faintest tremor betraying the steadiness she usually carried. I swallowed hard, aware of the warmth radiating from her presence, and the faint scent of her perfume that seemed to linger just a little longer in the quiet room. Neither did I admitted, my voice low, careful, trying to balance honesty with restraint. My hand hovered near hers, as though drawn by gravity, yet I didn't move closer. Hesitation held me back, a reminder of the professional boundaries and the unspoken rules that both of us knew. And yet, the pull between us was undeniable, a magnetic tension that made every small gesture, every brush of hair, every tilt of her head, feel electric. She leaned back slightly, a subtle sigh escaping her lips, and I could see the weight of her own internal conflict mirrored in her eyes. I don't know what this means, she admitted, voice trembling just enough to be human, relatable. But I know I can't ignore it. Her honesty, raw and unpolished, created a space of trust between us, a fragile intimacy that had never existed before. I wanted to reach out, to close the small distance between us, but restraint and respect kept me still. Instead, I let my gaze hold hers, letting the silence speak for the words I couldn't find. The simple presence of each other, side by side in the quiet office, became a confession in itself. Every subtle shift, her shoulder leaning slightly closer, my hand resting lightly near hers, was a delicate dance of acknowledgement, desire, and hesitation. In that moment, I realized that this connection, though complicated, was real. It wasn't just admiration anymore, nor fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, something quietly insistent, a bond built on trust, respect, and the tiny, electrifying gestures we'd shared over weeks. And as I glanced at her, illuminated by the soft lamplight, I knew that while neither of us had crossed the line yet, we had already stepped into a space where understanding, intimacy, and unspoken desire intertwined. By the time we packed up for the night, the air between us felt different, warmer, heavier, filled with the promise of something neither of us could fully name yet. Our eyes met one last time before leaving, a lingering glance that said more than words ever could. And in that quiet, unspoken acknowledgement, I realized that everything had changed, slowly, delicately, and irrevocably. The following week felt different, lighter, somehow, though nothing had changed outwardly. We continued our work, but every glance, every shared smile, carried a subtle warmth that neither of us tried to hide. The tension that had once been electric and hesitant had softened into something steady, a quiet undercurrent of connection that threaded through each interaction. It began with small, unspoken acknowledgments. When we walked together to the break room, our hands occasionally brushed, and neither pulled away. When discussing projects, our eyes would meet, lingering just long enough for a smile to form, a silent confirmation of mutual understanding. It wasn't overt or dramatic, there were no declarations or bold gestures, but it was enough. Enough to make the ordinary moments feel meaningful, enough to make the office feel warmer than it ever had. One afternoon, as we were reviewing documents at a shared table, she leaned slightly closer, her hand grazing mine as she passed me a folder. The contact was fleeting, respectful, yet it sent a quiet thrill through me, and I noticed her own eyes soften in response. "You've been a great help," she said softly, her voice gentle, almost like a whisper meant only for me. I nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude and something more, a recognition that this bond, delicate as it was, had grown into mutual care. Later, as the office emptied, I noticed her lingering near the door, a subtle hesitation in her movements. I approached, and for a moment, we just stood there, a few steps apart, the quiet hum of the building surrounding us. Then she smiled, a soft, unguarded smile that seemed to melt away all the tension of the past weeks. Without thinking, I reached out, resting a hand lightly on hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let our fingers touch, a gentle acknowledgement of the unspoken connection we shared. We walked out together into the evening, the air cool against our skin, and she matched her pace to mine naturally. There was no rush, no urgency, just the steady rhythm of two people who had navigated weeks of hesitation, subtle attraction, and growing trust, finally allowing themselves to simply exist together in the moment. The age gap, the professional boundaries, the unspoken concerns, all of it seemed less daunting now, softened by the warmth of mutual respect and understanding. As we reached the parking lot, she turned to me, a lingering look in her eyes. "I'm glad we found this," she said softly, her voice carrying both relief and quiet joy. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently, feeling the steady warmth of her presence, the unspoken promise of connection, and the comfort of knowing that this was more than a fleeting moment. In that instant, I realized that our journey hadn't been about sudden passion or dramatic confessions. It had been about patience, attention, and the slow, careful cultivation of trust and intimacy. And in the gentle squeeze of her hand, the lingering smile, and the quiet comfort of simply being near her, I understood something profound. We had found something rare and beautiful. Something worth nurturing, slowly, tenderly, and completely. And as we parted that evening, both of us carrying the quiet satisfaction of a bond fully realized, I felt a sense of peace and warmth wash over me. Everything had changed, yes, but it had changed for the better. For the first time in a long while, I knew that this connection, subtle yet undeniable, would continue to grow, rooted in respect, affection, and the slow-burning understanding that only time and patience could create.